Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about the women who are reshaping our world. Coming up, Beijing relaxes its one-child policy after it leaves China with an ageing population and a gender imbalance. But just how quickly will those changes be enforced? Also, how hard is it for young Palestinian women to study in the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip? And in the Lebanese city of Tripoli, often the scene of bloody sectarian violence, we meet the country's first female priest. But first, the Chinese state is going to allow more families to have 2 children from 2014 onwards. The decision will be a change to almost 35 years of a one-child policy. Still, restrictions remain in place. Couples are only allowed to have 2 children and only if one of the parents comes from a single-child family. We'll be hearing from our correspondent in Beijing in just a moment, but first, this report from Clovis Casali.
Will the Chinese one day be allowed to have as many children as they want? Not yet, but Beijing has loosened its one-child policy. Under the new legislation, if one of the parents has no siblings, the couple can have 2 children. Before, it was only possible if both parents were single children.
In China, there are currently 16 million newborns every year. With a policy adjustment, there will be an extra 2 million births a year. It's estimated that in the next 20 years, the Chinese population will increase by 100 million people.
China faces looming demographic challenges with a rapidly increasing elderly population and a shrinking labour force. Since the 1990s, the replacement rate is far from achieved, and without this latest policy change by 2050, 30% of the Chinese would be over 60 years old. But according to some experts, the end of the one-child policy will be hard to implement as it is a source of revenue for local authorities.
You can imagine how much money they could get putting fines on people who had one too many children. And these people are not ready to give that up. As a matter of fact, as soon as the National Assembly announced the relaxation of the one-child policy, some provinces immediately said, we will relax it when we decide to.
Until now, rural couples were allowed to have a second child if their first was a girl or was disabled. Some ethnic minorities were also exempt from what is one of the most controversial birth control policies in the world.
And for more on this story, let's cross to Beijing to speak to correspondent Paul James. Paul, one of the major reasons for changing the law has been the gender imbalance, with more boys than girls being born. How has that impacted Chinese society?
It's had a fairly significant impact on the Chinese society. Some estimates are suggesting that because of the preference here in China, along with many other Asian countries, for boys, that issues such as selective abortions, infanticide in some rare cases, have created a demographic imbalance to where estimates are suggesting that by 2020 there may be an additional 20 million extra men compared to women in this country. Now that, of course, creates all sorts of social challenges, in particular for men who all of a sudden realize that they're having a difficult time finding a bride. And it also creates challenges moving along as we go through the years because of issues such as how families take care of one another here in China, because the social safety net here in China has always been that as you get older, your children are expected to look after you. But with the one-child policy, a lot of elderly people or people who are becoming elderly these days are finding that their children just don't have the capability to take care of them because of the fact that they only had the one child. So there's a lot of social issues that have come into play with this policy. So the changes that are being brought in officials are hoping that this will eventually rebalance things a little bit more and create a little bit more of a gender equality and deal with some of these issues that are haunting, are beginning to haunt society here in China right now.
Paul, let me also just follow up on that. I mean, what impact has it had on particularly women in China?
Well, it's had a very different impact on women for a number of different reasons. Because of the fact that women were only allowed to have one child in certain circumstances, it created issues such as forced abortions, and there was a lot of adoption issues that were brought forward for women as well, and one that really sort of created social stigmas surrounding women who did end up having to have an abortion and were forced to deal with the family planning policies on that front. And it's one that has created a lot of concern, not only from demographics point of views, but from psychological point of views as well, because it becomes a very challenging issue for younger women in particular who find themselves, pregnant out of wedlock, and issues like this.
Now, briefly, Paul, our report was saying that it's going to be hard to implement this policy change because it's a source of much needed revenue for local authorities. How will Beijing challenge that mindset?
It will be a very difficult task for the authorities to try and shy away from this, because part of the rules state that if you do have the second child, you incur a fine, and this is the way in which some of the local authorities through the years have managed to generate funds. But the authorities here in Beijing are probably going to take a sort of monetary approach, in the fact that if these smaller areas do find themselves challenged by the lack of finances, subsidies will probably be brought in and put in to deal with the issues that are brought up on that front.
Paul James in Beijing, thank you. And moving on, Gaza is a tiny strip of land of just 365 square kilometres, which lies at the heart of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Since 2006, the coastal enclave has been ruled by the Palestinian militant group Hamas, and for years people have strived to live their daily lives as they face regular food and fuel shortages. France 24's Gallagher Fenwick meets a young woman who's determined to pursue her university education no matter what.
More than 1.7 million Palestinians live along this coastal strip, which covers 360 square kilometers. The unemployment rate is one of the worst in the world. According to the United Nations, nearly half of Gaza's working-age population is jobless. But the high rate of literacy offers a glimmer of hope. 9 out of 10 Gaza residents can read. Like many other young people, Dana Ismail pins her hopes for a better life on her studies. On her way to university, Dana recounts some of the challenges that she and other women students face.
Studying isn't simple for girls in Gaza. There are some families who don't let their daughters go to university. That's the case for many girls I know. Their parents are afraid to let them walk in the street by themselves. They don't like the idea that they can come across boys. Our society and our families are very conservative.
For Dana, there's no question about it. In Gaza, it's better to be a boy.
When you hear the comments made to girls who want to go outside, who want to work, it's clear that boys have a lot more freedom than girls do in Gaza.
Dana goes to the first public university in Gaza, the Al-Aqsa University. She studies French in a classroom tucked discreetly into the back of the courtyard. The French department is an exception in the Palestinian enclave because here boys and girls can sit together. But what is the sense in studying French in Gaza? Dana explains.
Nearly all of the students here learn French, with the hope of someday traveling.
Most of the students admit that it's their dream to escape this closed-off territory.
And you can see an extended version of that story on our programme Revisited, which first goes to air on January 12th. Staying in the region, now the city of Tripoli in northern Lebanon has become synonymous with bloody sectarian violence. The conflict in neighbouring Syria has aggravated tensions. Battling amid the violence, though, is the country's first woman priest. Pastor Rola Slayman is running an evangelical church in the city, as Nick Rushworth explains.
The Lebanese army is in place in Tripoli in a bid to calm tensions between the majority Sunni and minority Alawite communities. They are the dominant religious groupings, but there is also a small Christian presence in the city. Born in Tripoli to a Syrian Presbyterian father and a Lebanese Catholic mother, Rola Slayman had a Christian upbringing and studied theology in Beirut. She became Lebanon's first female priest by filling in for her predecessor.
Circumstances arose which meant the priest had to travel to America for family reasons. The church had nobody. They didn't ask for a pastor. And then things just happened. As I've studied theology, they asked me if I could preach for a month. Then 1 month followed another, and I took charge for several months.
Slayman is now fully in charge. In a country where women make up less than a quarter of the workforce, gaining acceptance as a female priest has not been easy.
What helped is that I'm a daughter of the church and I knew the congregation. Church members who think in a Middle Eastern way overcame the gender question. They didn't think about whether I was male or female, or that they wanted a male priest.
In terms of women's rights, Lebanon ranks poorly. It was 16th out of 22 Arab states in a recent poll. Rola Slayman, working amid Tripoli's sectarian struggle, is striking a blow for the cause of women.
And that's it for this edition. If you've liked what you've just seen and want to comment, check out our Facebook page. That's France24/the51%. Or you can send us a tweet at _51%. We'd love to hear from you. And until our next program, bye for now.